Okay, so welcome everyone to our first ever Classical Teaching 101 workshop series. I am so excited to begin bringing these to you. The vision behind this is that we wanted, at Padea, our main thing is mastering our craft of classical teaching. We want to uh, acknowledge the beauty and the all the things that we can create through teaching and really take seriously cultivating that craft, and then provide and be in a free space to grow and explore and be where we're at, and then get the learning and the instruction that we need to go to the next level in a space of joy and curiosity. And so these workshops are all oriented towards that. Each workshop will have a focus. This first one, of course, is writing. And at the end of this workshop, we'll announce what our next theme is. And our goal is to have these once a quarter. So every 3 months or so, you should see a free workshop for all of you to help you with your classical teaching. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Jennifer Dow. I started in teaching in the education world in 2009 when I started to homeschool my children. And I never thought I was going to be a teacher. My mother was a teacher, and I was like, I will never be a teacher. It just was that I had decided that. And of course, when you decide something like that, then of course you become that. and through starting to homeschool my kids, I discovered classical education, and then you know how we do. We're at the conference, we meet this person, we discover another resource, and it just snowballed into falling in love with classical education, what it offered me personally in my own journey of becoming a better human, but also I found that I just love this philosophy of teaching. It was very nourishing to me and my students. I discovered the Circe apprenticeship and went through their apprenticeship program and graduated from that in 2014. And since then, we've been doing a lot of different things. We have had our 1 day a week school here locally, and just last year we put it online, and that's been fun to explore the online teaching world. Even with classical education. And we also focus a lot on teacher training. So we started the fellowship, which is our teacher coaching program. It's really a collaborative space where it's the faculty room for the homeschool mom, in other words. One of the things I noticed as I was diving deeper into my own training and transformation as a teacher, I was like, oh, there's this huge value with having a faculty, a staff that you can collaborate with, that you can shoot ideas off with, that you can be like, hey, come watch me teach. I'm having trouble with landing this particular lesson. We didn't have anything like that. We don't have anything like that in the homeschool community. And I feel like that is something that was really in the gap for us. And so we created the fellowship in response to that, to have a space where we can continue learning and also deeply communal. And so that's the other thing that we do at Padea. So we have our academy and we have the fellowship. But enough about me and more about writing. I'm going to stop that. Okay. Okay, here we go. Pull my notes. Oh, I also forgot to mention that you are also welcome to raise your hand when it's if there's some Q&A time at the end, and I'm happy to take verbal questions as well at the end if we have a little time at the end. So know that that's okay. Okay. So I'm going to be turning my head a little bit. I still haven't mastered the art of looking straight in the camera when I'm also looking at my notes. All right, so our first talk today is Rhetoric and Love, a humane approach to the art of persuasion. Let me hear from you guys for a second. What do you think about When you hear the word rhetoric or persuasion, what comes to mind? Throw it up in the chat. Convincing, embodiment. What else? Debate. See, all of you are already on point with the liberal arts. Normally, a lot of times what I'll hear is manipulation, or they come from a modern view of what rhetoric and persuasion is. And Scott Kreider actually talks about this very specifically, and I'm going to actually read the quote because it's quite lovely and it captures a lot of this. I mean, in today's world, when we're listening to the news, that sort of thing, passionate defense, yes, apologetics, we'll hear things like, oh, that's just rhetoric. We often mistrust rhetoric. There's spaces where we mistrust rhetoric and throw it in a category with manipulative advertisers and politicians. Rhetoric has come to mean power over others in most circles. We are in this kind of special cocoon, I feel, in the classical education world, where we get to see it differently. That's not how the rest of the world sees it and interacts with it and experiences it. What if the good practice of rhetoric was one replete with humility and love for every circle? What if it could be that, both for the good of the speaker and the good of the audience? What if rhetoric offered a form that allows a man to lead and love his fellow, and that fellow man then had the opportunity to transform? This is what we will be exploring in today's discussion. Okay, so let's first look at what is rhetoric. On page 5 of Scott Kreider's book, Office of Assertion, of course, we're going to have book recommendations throughout today. This is my favorite book on rhetoric, modern book on rhetoric. I love the way he talks about it, and you'll see. He says, according to Aristotle, rhetoric is the faculty of discovering the possible means of persuasion in reference to any subject whatever. Kreider says there are 3 essential parts to the definition. Generally, rhetoric is a faculty of mind. 2 other aspects differentiated from other such faculties. First, this faculty of mind discovers means of persuasion. Second, it does so in particular circumstances. Rhetoric also has 5 canons: invention, arrangement, elocution, memory, and delivery. Each canon governs some aspect of the practice of rhetoric. We'll dig into those a little bit later. I want to zero in on the word practice for a second. But some of the things that we're going to be learning today are distinctions in how we view a thing, distinctions in our mindset or perspective on various topics. But today, rhetoric, or right now, rhetoric. One of the things that I have found as I've been coaching teachers and developing my own craft is 80% of my practice and my growth comes from refining my mindset. And only 20% of it is really the concrete, practical stuff. We talk a lot about, I need the practical details. What I've learned is I think one of the main things we're asking for in that moment is an embodiment. I need an example so I can see it embodied, kind of thing. And when we combine the mindset, when we've refined our mindset, it's like the plans just kind of happen. And we'll talk more about mindset throughout the day, but it's something I just want to draw our attention to, is this distinction between particulars and plans and mindset. And there's a lot more that mindset creates than we often realize, more than I realized a couple years ago. Okay, so Let's talk about a few other terms. A faculty. What is a faculty? Now we're using faculty in a different way. A faculty essentially is a power. Much like any other power one could have or cultivate, powers of the body would be things like strength or self control. Powers of the mind are like reasoning, power or understanding, wisdom. Powers of the affections are like courage or endurance. Powers have to be discovered, trained, and refined. I often think about, and when I talk about this with my students, we talk about superheroes. You know, who here is a superhero fan? DC, are you team DC or team Marvel? I mean, this is important information, you know. We need to know where everyone stands on this. Is you know that moment, the superhero, especially if they come into their powers, they have that moment where they discover they have powers and they're kind of a hot mess. Oh, Marvel's good. They're running into stuff. I'm thinking especially of the Flash right now, where he's running into cars and just making a mess everywhere. He's come into his powers, but he does not know what to do with them. He has no control over them. However, when he starts to get trained, some pretty powerful stuff happens. And that is the same situation for us, with the powers that we have, that every single human being is born with. We are all born with certain faculties, certain powers that get to be discovered and cultivated and refined. A liberal art, and this is where the liberal arts come in. The liberal arts are sets of arts, seven different arts that cultivate our intellectual powers. Our art, Andrew Kern talks about them as arts of truth perception. It's the power of perception, the power of attention. Through studying the liberal arts, rhetoric being one of them, we are learning to cultivate and refine our power of our faculty of truth perception. Attention. These are all different ways of saying it. So I'm assuming most of us are familiar with the seven liberal arts, but I'm going to just review them for a second, just in case anyone is not. And so when we talk about the seven liberal arts, we talk about, we're not talking about them in the sense when you think, oh, a liberal arts college, like it's a liberal arts, that we're just taking an interdisciplinary approach to our curriculum. So there's that view, that way people use that. And then people use the term liberal to mean a political stance. And we're not talking about that either. We are talking about the freeing of the mind to have complete mastery over itself. When the Flash does not know how to handle his power, does not understand it, he hurts other people and himself. And notice his journey of growth. Well, sometimes I'm like, dude, like, you know better than that. So he's on a journey of growing in virtue as well. And so he has this journey of refining his powers in a very physical sense, but then also the kind of man he's becoming and the decisions he makes and allows himself to make on this journey. And so the seven liberal arts train us how to master ourselves in our minds and give us opportunity to practice virtue so that we're good men and women in the use of these powers. Because make no mistake, rhetoric is a powerful thing to learn. Not only did it produce the Martin Luther King Jr.'s of our world, it produced the Hitlers. And I think it's important to let that sit with us, to know that that's what we're offering to our students. And it should bring us a feeling of humility and a little bit of, I have something tremendous here in my hands that I'm leading my students to. And when we submit our work to the Lord, he takes care of us too. And so I think it's good to hold that tension between feeling that, but also giving ourselves grace and like holding that space. We don't want to go too far to one side or the other. Okay, so the 7 liberal arts, there's 3 language liberal arts and 4 mathematical liberal arts. There's grammar, logic, and rhetoric that cultivate through language certain faculties, and then the mathematical arts that cultivate through math certain intellectual faculties. The grammar, logic, and rhetoric are the language, and arithmetic, geometry, harmonics, and astronomy are the mathematical arts. And if you want to learn more about those, there are several articles on the Paideia Fellowship blog, and also I would probably the best overview book of them, I would say, I'm looking at it, it's up there, The Liberal Arts Tradition by Clark and Jan, Jain, is a great overview that kind of puts all of this in context in the way that I'm talking about it. Okay, so they are liberal because when we perceive the truth, we are set free, free to see reality, freed from the prison of the lies we believe, freed from false perspectives of others and situations. In freeing ourselves, we also then have an opportunity to free others. This is the practice of sanctification, the practice of becoming the best version of ourselves. Rhetoric has it is a practice that allows us to do that, like really. I'm always amazed when I start talking about it. I'm like, oh, wow, education really can be used for the glory of God. Like everything can work towards this. This is amazing. It's like, and then I remind myself of it and then I just get really excited. It's so exciting. So the liberal arts cause the ones who study them to break free from the mental prisons that we find ourselves in. One of the things, and this is just part of the human condition, none of us have perfect perspective. And so just like if you're working out physically, it's something you get to keep doing and then continue to increase in strength. And if you stop, then you have to keep going again. The mind is a similar thing. Our default when we go into autopilot mentally is to tell stories that may or may not be connected to reality. We are myth-making, meaning-making machines. It's how God created us. We are his children and he's a creator. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And we get to know that we do that. And because we know we do that, we get to constantly take ourselves on and say, okay, is that true? Is that story that I'm telling myself accurate? This way I'm perceiving this situation and what this person just said, am I connected to what's really going on? Rhetoric helps to train that thing in our mind that helps us to discern that, to take ourselves on, to ask the hard questions, and to do this in community with others. Okay, so with rhetoric, there are the formal components of creating a speech, an essay, or a poem. There is also the content, the audience, and each requires a certain kind of attention to handle it according to its nature. That's another big mindset principle that we talk a lot about at Paideia. When we're trying to make decisions about what we're going to teach or not teach, how we're going to teach, we're asking, what is the nature of this thing? And is the decision I'm making in alignment with the nature of it? Because when we treat things not according to their nature, like how is a tree meant to be treated? A human, a person, a bird. And if we do something that's in opposition to what they're all about, it feels violent. It feels like at best just inappropriate. Like, why would you do that? That doesn't make sense. There's like a disorientation around it at best. And so and this is something Andrew Kern told me in the apprenticeship, and it was like one of the last things he told me before I graduated, and I've hung on to this and it has not steered me wrong thus far, is that if we think about nature, purpose, and propriety, just whatever we're teaching, whatever we're doing, we are asking, what is their nature? What is the purpose? And what is appropriate in light of that? We're, we're going to go somewhere pretty steady and grounded, um, and connected to the ideal that we're searching for. So according to its nature, if we are masters of form, but do not consider the circumstances or the nature of our audience, the ideas we want to communicate are not going to have the effect we hoped for. And really, at the end of the day, isn't that the question? What's going to create the results that I want? And then what is in alignment? What is the, well, first of all, what are the results I want? Because sometimes we're not totally clear of that. And then what gets us there? If we consider our audience, but fail to think through how people make decisions, then our ideas and words lose persuasive power because we're not honoring the nature of where a person's at. Sometimes I think about like what Aristotle and Cicero and Quintilian must have been doing when they were sitting around. I'm like, I wonder if they just sat and watched people talk for a very long time. I'm sure, yes, they did. I'm saying that all loud. I'm like, of course they did. There's this thing called the polis. Yeah, that's literally what they did all day. Um, and but I was like, what had to happen that they began to notice these patterns emerge? So one of the things I appreciate about Charlotte Mason is she prioritized just observing children. And from her observations, she noticed things and then applied what she was noticing and discovered principles and patterns within her noticing, and then applied them to her practice of teaching. When I think about the books, the authors that are in this tradition, I see them as those kind of people that have taken the time to be attentive enough to allow the patterns to emerge. And so one of the things that these men, and what I don't think there's any ancient women authors on rhetoric. I know there's some, well, that's a different talk. Is they were really looking at how people make decisions, how people come to be persuaded. When and just think about yourself for a moment. Like, let's decontextualize it from the, oh, I'm writing this essay and I got to learn how to write this essay, and just step back and think about how you are as a person when you're trying to wrestle with something and make a decision. We want to know the background. We want to get placed. We want to know, okay, what's the context? Like, I need to be oriented to this moment, orient me to this moment. And then we want to hear what you have to say. And then I might have some concerns depending on how it's presented, what the topic is, what was covered, what was not covered. I'm like, yeah, but what about this? But what about this? If I'm having this collaborative discussion, and for somebody to ignore my need to ask these questions, are we going to be persuaded? No, we're going to be like, that's kind of like rude. I mean, I have this legitimate concern. And so when we talk about honoring the nature of a person with rhetoric, and this applies in writing, essays, giving speeches, and debate and conversation. Like, I have applied these things in just general conversation with people. It applies in all communication, areas of communication. It even applies in social media. Like, I mean, obviously we don't have like Cicero's version of how to post, classically, but although that would be a fun social media campaign to imagine that. But it applies. And the thing that the come from is this perspective of, what do you need to hear so that you feel oriented, you know what we're talking about, your concerns are being addressed. It's loving them. It's loving them. If we both consider our audience and master the form, but have not done our due diligence in thoroughly exploring our topic, we lose persuasive power and quite possibly credibility. So we have this attention to the audience, we have the form of rhetoric, and then we have the content that we have a responsibility to know. I would also add, and St. Paul says it best, if we have all these things but have not love, we are only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. I feel like he could have been talking to like sophists there. all the aspects work together to create a scenario where truth and transformation has the best opportunity to be discovered and encountered in conversation and community. Scott Kreider puts it this way. He says, rhetoric is the art of soul leading by means of words. Each time one asks another person to read one's work, one is in the Socratic position of leading that reader through the small world of the essay, or the speech, or the conversation. A reading experience that gives shape somehow to the world itself. Rhetoric is the care of words and things. That care is associative, a practice one learns and never stops learning in the presence of others, the ones you lead and are led by. Such soul leading is a liberal power, one which in its finest and fullest manifestation is a form of love. The finest rhetorician not only loves wisdom, but also loves others who do so. The finest rhetor, then, is a friend. Okay. So what does this look like? Oh, there's a couple of comments. Here's what it talks about. I love that. Just let the chicken be the chicken. I can just see somebody saying that. That's great. Okay, so what does this look like on the ground level? So let's start with seeking to understand our audience and accepting them where they are. So the first thing, seek to understand your audience and accept them where they are. This goes back to the second part of the definition Kreider gives us. He mentioned in particular circumstances. Technically, this could be included in the invention canon. And in case anyone's not oriented to the term canon, it's just the 5 realms we get to explore in rhetoric to have the skill set and master the form of rhetoric. And they divide all the skills of rhetoric into 5 categories. And so there's these 5 categories that we're calling canons that produce skills that allow us to produce this soul leading by means of words. And so we're going to go into that a little bit more, but just know that's what we mean by the 5 canons of rhetoric. They're the 5 realms you get to master skill-wise. Okay, I think it's important to look at separately. So this idea of in particular circumstances, you can put in invention, because one of the things you're looking at when you're exploring and researching a topic are the circumstances of it. But when we look at it separately, it produces something. Socrates calls this discovering the kind of soul. I think another way you could say that is the nature of a person, their proclivities, their past experiences. It also includes thinking about their circumstances, historical setting, social and family setting. I mean, just think about this in light of if you are having a casual debate with somebody and you guys disagree about a topic and you really are feeling like, okay, I want to communicate this idea, but this person has very different circumstances than you. It would, if your goal is persuasion, now, if your goal is just to hear yourself talk, like, because you can tell the difference when somebody's like, are you really wanting to have a conversation? Like, you can tell the vibes are a little bit different. And so, when we check in with our motive, if the goal is persuasion, then we have a responsibility to know the person that we're talking to. And of course, the person's mysterious. We're mysteries to each other. But to as much as is possible, where is this person's come from? How can I meet them where they are? Socrates was a master at this. I think the most profound example that stands out to me is in the Phaedrus, when this young man comes to him to share his speech with him and asks for his opinion. And this speech is kind of grotesque. I mean, it's not, and Socrates is willing to meet him where he is at. The topic of the speech is basically how to persuade a young boy to fall in love with you, to say it nicely. And Socrates, in the service of, let me meet you where you're at so I can lead you somewhere else. But if he had just dropped him at that moment, Phaedrus wouldn't have had the conversation that he had with him. He wouldn't have been opened to a new understanding. And that's like a weird tension, right? But again, what is our goal? If the goal is persuasion, we get to know our audience. That's part of it. Okay. And in getting to know, and I'm just, and I'll say this last thing about it is, in light of man being a mystery, there's this tension of knowing our neighbor, but also recognizing that they're a mystery. And there's a limit to what we can know about a person. We can do our best to learn and prepare, and then trust the rest of the Holy Spirit. There's this passage in Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and he expresses it beautifully. He talks about driving. So he's a messenger, kind of a postman character, and he's riding horse and carriage into the city, and he notices all the buildings, and it's like dark because it's early morning before the sun is up, and so there's like this shadowy vibe going over the whole thing, and he's just struck by the notion that in every single one of these apartments, in every single one of these rooms, there's another person, and the person next to them, even the mystery of not knowing who's in each of these buildings, in each of these rooms, and even in the room itself, when they're next to the person, how much we don't even tell the person next to us. Like they and the the curious and incredible adventure it is to actually witness another mystery in front of us and hold space for that. That's beautiful, and part of it. And so we get to hold both sides in tension, an intention to get to know a person and be connected, and honoring that they are mystery and have autonomy, and I don't get to impose on them either. And I don't think we ever uh leave that space, that tension. I think, I could be wrong, but right now I feel like that is a tension I'll always feel. Like I'll never feel like I've figured that out. I will always feel the movement between those two sides. And learning to get comfortable with tensions, by the way, is one of the most important things we can do to become amazing classical educators, because there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of spaces we get to hold, and it's not pleasant all the time. And so the quicker we can be comfortable with, okay, this is mess and mystery, and I'm here for it, the better teachers we're going to be. Okay, next. So the first one was seek to understand your audience and accept them where they are. The only other thing I will say about that is, when we say accept them where we are, I am not talking about condoning bad behavior. That is not what I mean by that. All it is an acknowledgement of what milestone they are actually at, and saying, I see you over there at that milestone, and I love you right now, and let's move towards this vision together. But I'm not going to lie to myself or the student and pretend they're further along than they really are. And so we get to, without shame or judgment, acknowledge where a person is as best we can. Next, seek to understand the content. This is the realm of the canon of invention. Invention governs the discovery of truth. When we are approaching invention, the first thing, and this is where mindset is the most important. Well, it's important the whole time, but this is where it matters the most, where if you don't have the right mindset, it's almost impossible for the students to do invention without the right mindset. In fact, if you're coming to the Lost Tools talk, I'm going to go deeper into the specific mindset you want to coach in your students when you're coaching invention, because it is specific. And if they don't have it, what you're going to experience is frustration. They're not going to get it. They're not going to be enthusiastic about it. And it all is mindset. None of it is the curriculum. None of it is the particular book. It doesn't matter what the book is. It doesn't matter what, well, some curriculum matter, but it's shocking how much the mindset is. So we'll dive deeper into that. But for now, what we're going to talk about is that the idea that demeanor matters, mindset matters. And so the first part of that demeanor in general is withholding judgment until one understands. Withholding judgment until one understands. If you want to read more deeply about this, Mortimer Adler in his book, How to Read a Book, and I know there's a lot of like strong opinions about this book. And sometimes I wonder, well, but there's a lot of great stuff in here, actually. He has a couple chapters on rhetoric and the maxims of intellectual etiquette and what rhetoric has to do with the reading process and how to disagree with someone. And it's fantastic. It's really in alignment with our ideals in the classical education world. I can't find any fault in it from my current understanding. But those chapters that I just mentioned in his book are excellent to explore this. What does it look like to withhold judgment until you understand in an academic setting? Because truly, I might not even be right. Like I have my current stance and on things, but I know I had a stance on things a year ago and it's not the same. I mean, some things are the same, but I'm constantly learning and growing. And if I put myself in this box or my students in this box that says, you have to know 100% or you can't speak, none of us would be able to speak. That's not a real thing. Like that's not, it's just not a real thing. So my opinion, I get to detach from my opinion and not take it so personally. How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. So, thanks guys. And that's hard. That's hard. I'm not going to pretend that's not hard. There is, and so it's harder for some of us than others. And it's something you'll get to coach your students in and be compassionate about. It can feel, especially if somebody has had a history of trauma or abuse, has abandonment issues, struggles with like codependency kind of stuff. Those who have those kind of issues, and I think it's important to be mindful of because it feels like you're dying to release control sometimes. And if a student's struggling with that, if you as a mother or a teacher have struggled with that, it can feel very threatening to release our ideas. And so you'll get to be gentle with yourself as you practice it, and it will become easier as you continue to practice it. I like to bring in these things because it's these moments where that internal battle where like, I don't know if I can do this. It's how we feel about it that is in the gap between producing the result we want or not. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the curriculum and everything to do with how I feel about it and my own personal hangups about something. And that when I can address my hangups, then all of a sudden things are flowing. And it's not necessarily academic related at all, but it's the very thing standing in the way of producing the academic results. And we get to be whole people. Okay. So our demeanor, when we're talking about understanding content, we're approaching it, mastering the content, we're approaching it with the spirit of I'm withholding judgment until I understand. And operating in a way where I'm open to learning and growing. So general curiosity, like, okay, I'm just going to set this on the side burner. I'm going to detach. I'm like, okay, I hold this opinion over here. We're just going to set you over there, hang out. I think Wendell Berry's poem, number 1 from 1979, where he talks about having his tasks lie in the field and wait. That poem is a great description or pattern for doing this. And so we just put them over there. We don't have to get rid of them. We can pick them back up as soon as the discussion or the invention is over if we want. but we're just going to put them over there. And then we're going to be open and curious and have energy around exploring. Like, okay, what do you think? Let me get curious. Because the other part of curiosity is it's a form of surrender. So until we've surrendered our own attachments to, like, I have to make sure this is proved, we're going to have a hard time. We can't be curious because they're antithetical to each other. Curiosity is a form of surrender plus play together. So the tool we use in collecting and exploring are the 5 topics of invention. These are questions that are especially suited to help us see many sides and aspects of a thing as possible. So how much can I notice about this? When you're reading, you're seeking to understand what the author, what he is trying to say through his work. And with writing, you're exploring your topic as thoroughly and honestly as possible. So this applies both in a reading sense and writing, and rightly so, because reading and writing are reciprocal arts. You can only write as deeply as you have read. In conversation, it looks like ask more than we tell. There is a time for telling, but if we do not know where a person's coming from, it might be wiser to ask some questions before drawing conclusions. In this way, invention promotes an open exploration of ideas without shame and judgment. Third, work with nature as we enter conversation and soul-leading situations. This is the realm of arrangement. Here we want to pay attention to how people learn and process through ideas. One of the things I love about classical rhetoric is it provides us a form that helps us attend to these realities. Let's walk through the parts of a persuasive essay, and I'll show you what I mean. If you're not teaching this kind of writing, each part speaks to the things we can consider as we talk to others. So it applies across the board, whether it be conversation or reading, especially if we are attempting to make decisions with others and come to understanding of the truth. Okay, so in a persuasive essay, it always starts out with something called an exordium. And an exordium invites the reader into the world of the essay. It's the first invitation. The principle, and when I teach rhetoric to my students, I call these love principles, because everything I teach in rhetoric, my pet peeve is teaching arbitrary stuff. I can't stand it. And I know my students can't stand it. And I sometimes I'm probably too hard on myself about it, to be honest, but I scrutinize. I'm like, is this necessary? If not, it's out. Is this arbitrary? Would the student feel like it's arbitrary? And so every part of the persuasive essay is there for a reason. And you know how oftentimes, like, and we usually see this come up with math. Oh, math, I'm never going to use it in life, so I don't really need to know it. Like, I'm never going to do these algebraic equations, so I don't really need to do it. And of course we know differently, but that can feel, any subject can feel that way. So how do we connect it to a space where, actually, let me show you. So I call them like our love reasons, like what's the love behind this? Because what I'm asserting, essentially my thesis as a rhetoric teacher, is rhetoric is the practice of loving your fellow man. Like, I believe that with my whole being. Rhetoric is a practice of loving your fellow man. And so if that's true, then how are all these things loving my fellow man? Because they certainly can be used to manipulate and control. So what does love look like here? Exordium, first principle, invite over impose. When we begin a discourse with others, are we imposing our will on them, or are we inviting them and waiting for them to accept the invitation? And if they decline the invitation, are we detached, or do we get in our feelings and try to control? An invitation by default can be turned down or accepted. And we get to deal with our own emotions about if somebody, and I'm speaking just, generally here, obviously, if I'm reading my student's essay, I'm not going to be like, I decline this invitation. I'm not going to continue reading this. But the principle here that we're practicing and learning and teaching our students is that we invite people. We don't impose on people. People are autonomous. They are separate than us, and we get to honor their no and celebrate their yes and still love them either way. And it's okay. And I don't have to take it personally because it doesn't mean anything about me and who I am. They can just say no for whatever reason they want, and that's okay. Now, of course, there's nuances in that when we're talking about children and students and the dynamic between teacher and parent, and that, we can talk about that at a different time. But as a general principle, we invite over imposing. The exordium does that. Narratio. What is the kindness here? What is the love here? Narratio places the reader. To throw someone in a mess and not orient them at all is not kind. It's disorienting. It's not in alignment with the way the human mind works. It's frustrating. Now, obviously, there's situations we're just thrown into the mix and we have to deal with that and learn how to cope with that, but it's not pleasant. Narratio. Thank you, Deanna. And so narratio tells the story up to the point of your thesis that places the reader in time and space and idea. And so we're orienting them. What about proofs and subproofs? Well, we've just, waxed poetic for exordium and narratio. Like, what are we even talking about? So now we get to actually say the thing. And I think the guiding principle here is courage and clarity. Yes, some people say narrative. Is courage and clarity. And the love here is a couple different things. When it comes to writing, it's like I'm standing for myself in the sense that I actually think this, and now I'm going to say it without apologizing for it. As I've assessed a lot of students' papers, some they'll soften the blow a little bit, or they'll soften what they're going to say and make excuses for it. And I'm like, oh no, you get to say what you think without apologizing for it. And, depending on the families we come from, that may be really hard for some students, easier for others. But so the first principle of proofs and subproofs, that part of the essay, is courage. And also, I would say authenticity is probably a better word. Authenticity, being authentic. If I think something, I can say it. And I get the tension too, because like what we were talking about earlier, we can always learn something new. So how do we assert what we think and the truths we've currently landed on with the tension of, oh, I might learn something new tomorrow? And, how I personally deal with it is, first of all, trying to accept it. But then if I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm totally on point with this, I might just say, based on my current understanding, where I'm currently at, this is what I've landed on. Because then I can really say with authority and confidence, this is what I actually think. And I'm also open to, so there's ways to do that. But again, authenticity and clarity, clearly saying what I think. Being vague does not serve anyone. And if this really is a way of loving our neighbor, if we're talking about something important, then it's an act of love to stand for someone. When we see a friend or a spouse or a child like off the path, out of alignment, it's unloving to not stand for them and be like, hey, this is not in alignment with your highest self. What are you doing? What's going on? Like, let's talk about that. Standing for someone. Proofs are standing for someone. And we get to stand for the people we love boldly. Refutation. Refutation is, I hear your concerns. So some people talk about refutation as, oh, you're going to destroy the opposing side and their arguments. That's not what's underneath this. If we're talking about the nature of people and how we make decisions, what is refutation about? Noticing that people have a wrestling match when they are on the road to making a decision. And And it's very normal for somebody to not just automatically accept everything I say. We don't want our people to accept everything I say automatically. We want people to think for themselves. Yeah, it's a little more work as a parent and a teacher and a spouse to actually be in relationship with people and allow them space to have their own thoughts and not just, it would just be so much easier if you just trusted everything I said and just do it. That's, yeah, we don't want somebody, you like, yeah. So refutation is honoring, again, their autonomy. You're a different person and you have your process to coming to terms with this. And that process is okay. And there's no shame about it. And I'm not going to force you to be on my timetable. So, what are your concerns? Let's talk about it. I noticed you said that. I can totally see how that's a concern for you. Here's my thoughts on it. This is why I don't think that it means we still shouldn't take this action. And then you share, and the conversation continues. Yeah, but oh, that makes sense too. I can see that. Or if you don't understand where they're coming from, can you tell me more about that? That's not landing for me. Like, tell me what's behind that? Where's your come from? So we get to continue being curious and then deal with those concerns. Honor them. There's nothing threatening about them. Disagreement is not a threat. Although there's lots of spaces in our world where people act and feel like it is. But in the academic rhetoric, community, the classical academic community, it's not a threat. It's where life happens. It's the wrestling match, and that's where apprehension springs from. Okay, recapitulation or the conclusion, where we're recapping what has been said. The human mind wanders. This is natural. And so when we come back and ground ourselves, and somebody has the kindness to ground us, be like, okay, let's recap. This is what we talked about. It reorients us and is an opportunity for synthesis, because the way that recapitulation lands on the other side of the proofs and the refutation is very different than the way it lands when you say it in the beginning. And then lastly, a call to action or some sort of ending or amplification. When we've gone through this whole process, the ending or the completion or the acknowledgement of this moment is, what of it? Are we going to tie knowledge to action, or are we going to just live in our heads? And so it's the next level invitation. So we start out with an invitation and we end with an invitation. Notice both are invitations. It's a stronger invitation, right? Notice the difference between inviting somebody into the essay by discussing an idea or a quote or something like that versus ending the essay with clarity and power and say, do this, and this is why. But it ends with an invitation as well. Still honoring the autonomy of another and saying, look, we're leading. If you're leading somebody, we get to be clear about what we want them to do. And this applies in teaching, because I think sometimes, depending on our communication patterns, and this is where you get to be aware of yourself, and I do this sometimes too, and I have to watch myself. I'll just be discussing something, because I love discussing ideas and I can get caught up in the energy of that. And then I'll forget sometimes to, oh, this is the thing I need you to do, or I want you to do. And this is what it looks like. And so my instructions sometimes are, I have to go back and re-explain things. And so as it relates to teaching, this is like, where am I going with this? Where am I going with this? And what am I asking you to do? Okay. Fourth, think about the best way to say something. This is the realm of elocution. Flannery O'Connor says when people ask her to tell them what their story is about, or what her story is about, she just says, read the story. Whenever we communicate anything, there are okay ways and better ways to say things. Is what you are trying to say something that can be expressed in a simple sentence? Or is it something that needs to be experienced through a metaphor or personification? And depending on what the kind of and if you haven't done your invention, this is going to be really hard to answer. How does it need to be said or experienced so that it really lands with the listener, the reader? So we're asking about appropriateness. 5, practice what you preach. This is the realm of memory. Know it by heart and have you lived it out? So the canon of memory, so this is post-essay. So, in rhetoric, it was meant to be a speech. It was something you were performing. So memory and delivery were always a part of that. It didn't just end with the essay. But now that we have writing, we'll often end with the essay and not do the memory and the delivery part of rhetoric. But memory is not only about learning how to memorize stuff, but it's about internalizing things. Socrates, he was huge on making the instruction in virtue just as much a part of his curriculum for his students as was the training in the form of rhetoric. And so letting it animate your being, whatever you're attempting to persuade someone about, is really important. The canon of memory governs not only how we memorize things, but the hope that we learn what we learn would be woven into the fiber of our being and change the way we live. I really believe this is the connection between understanding and appreciating an idea or work and then being changed by it. So you can see something out here and just appreciate it, but it's only going to change you when it's like, you've connected with it and you've let it integrate in, which takes courage, and it's worth it. And I know I talk very, I feel like I make things big, and so like it's umbrella, but it can be as simple as a small idea that's not like this life-shattering changing thing. Like this works on with some revelation about math and big revelations that shift your whole way of being. So the milestones in the spectrum, but it's all the same faculty. It's all the same practice. It all feels the same way when it's happening in your body. More intense at sometimes than others, but it's the same stuff. And then last, make sure your voice and body matches the logos of your content. This is the realm of oration. With oration, we are asking ourselves, am I speaking the truth with how I use my voice and my body? We know that we can say the same phrase multiple different ways and have entirely different meanings. And I think this is where a lot of the subtle manipulation can come in. And sometimes we just automatically do it. I mean, we all know moments where we've talked to a friend or a spouse and we changed our tone just a little bit into that, maybe we're being petty, maybe we're frustrated, and we change the tone a little bit. And so even though we're complying, it's very clear that there's something not right. and so this is where the practice of oratory we get to look at how we say things and be intentional and ask ourselves, what am I communicating? Am I lying? Right? Because if my voice doesn't match the words, I'm lying. It's inauthentic. And so we get to tell the truth at every level. Some final thoughts. Rhetoric is indeed a power, a practice, and a set of tools. And many choose to use it for ill purposes. I have heard it said that in this kind of education, we will educate both the good and the evil. But if we avoid teaching all people in this way to avoid producing the next Hitler, we will also avoid producing the next Martin Luther King Jr. That could have been. I'm going to read this quote. Page 4. And I'm going to end with this quote. The art of rhetoric is not unjust. Those who use it unjustly are. What makes one a sophist, and these were like the ancient rhetoricians that no, they weren't really concerned with your virtue, just persuasion, is not the faculty, but the moral purpose. So the moral purpose, what is my come from? What is my why? Aristotle believes that rhetoric and sophistry are distinct. Rhetoric is persuasion aimed at the truth. Sophistry is persuasion aimed only at the appearance of truth. The most important of its proofs is that rhetoric is a liberal art which liberates one both to defend oneself against untrue persuasions and to fashion true ones. Often those untrue persuasions are one's own. After all, we are all familiar with the sophist within, that part of us who arises, especially in haste or in anger, to utter sham arguments, arguments that in calmer, more reflective moments we know are mistaken. So rhetoric can free one even from one's own ignorance, disclosing the weaknesses of one's own idea. Having done so, it can then free others. Indeed, in freeing others, one frees oneself. Okay, thank you for joining me for this first talk. We're gonna be on break for the next 10 minutes. I'm willing to take a couple questions for 5 minutes, but feel free to take care of your needs. And then at about 11:15, we'll be back for the next session. That came from The Office of Assertion by Scott Kreider, The Art of Rhetoric for the Academic Essay. He has some really good stuff. My pleasure. I'm gonna scroll in the chat here. Are you looking to tie the learning into real? Well, okay, so that's a really good question, Denise. So Denise asks, are you looking to tie the learning into real world action at the end to apply the learning? So yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we want knowledge to live in action. We don't want to just live in our mind palaces and never be out in the world, right? So there's this assumption and goal of what we learn will come out through our limbs and affect the way we live. And because I'm not imposing, but I'm inviting, I'm not going to force that either. So there's a tension there that we hold, that I'm not going to impose the application on you if we're talking about like what is justice. So this would apply more to like big idea conversations that you're having, like if we're reading, the Republic and we're exploring the question, what is justice? I'm not telling one student what I think justice is and what I think they need to think justice is. We're going to read what Plato is saying and we're going to explore the entire time. Now, if I'm teaching them a skill set, I'm going to give them an application so they can practice the thing that I just assigned to them. And so in that sense, I'm imposing an application. I'm creating a training environment, and I'm having them do that. So it depends on what it is, and that would then give us a little like how we what I would say this way, what inviting and imposing or what invitation looks like will change based on the kind of thing that you're teaching. Does that answer your question? Do you want, I can unmute you if you want.
That's a very good explanation. Thank you. Because I was trying, that's a careful dance when you're teaching like third graders through sixth graders, the art of writing, like how to actually write a paragraph or something. So I'm trying to, because these are really for rhetoric, logic rhetoric, age groups, right? So I'm in grammar right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to like, what is that line in not imposing with the younger group, where like, but you teach a different older group, so I'll figure it out as I go.
Yeah, well, I think with the younger kids is the application is play. Like that's a good place to go when we're thinking about Because even with the younger kids, I mean, and this is where the tension is too, like if I have a toddler about to run out into the street, you better believe I'm imposing my will on that child. And so the question is like, where are they ruling themselves? And if they're ruling themselves in that area, then I get to invite them and respect their autonomy. If they are not ruling themselves in that area, I need to rule them, because otherwise they're going to be a danger to themselves or others. So I think that's a principle to ask when you're exploring where to impose and where not to. Where are they ruling themselves? Where are they not? Mhm. Okay. And any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to take a brief break and we'll be back very soon.